Hi everyone. I want to thank you for being so flexible with class last night and zooming in. I felt like there were a lot of really good things that happened. A few pointers that I would have is to maybe come up with ways that you can stay engaged looking at a computer screen. I know it's not easy, so some of the things that you'll see that I always have is a cup of tea or water. So I take sips when I realize I'm kind of falling asleep like that. I take notes. So I try to write down whatever the speaker's saying so that it keeps me engaged and listening, because I know that it can be really difficult to, look at a screen and hear someone talking and you don't have the energy of the person in the room. I liked that we had some questions. That's another really good technique to stay engaged is ask questions that come up along the way. And then also just being able to make connections to whatever it is that the reading is. So explicitly doing that so that it kind of breaks up the monotony of just having one speaker talking for an hour. So here were our expectations. You guys did a good job. Let me just make sure that there's nothing else that I wrote. If you guys can think of any other things that might be useful, then we can share those also in class next week. So, all right, let's go to this week's expectations. So we're going to go down. Remember that week 4 is the post-secondary transition, and that's where, let me scroll all the way down, you're going to be turning in your culturally responsive student transition project this week. There's examples of some here, and then the actual templates are right there. I'm going to take my video off now. And that you need to write the reflection, and you'll write that in your, let me just pull this over here. You'll write that in your critical reflection for this week. You're going to explain why you decided to add, alter, or delete slides, and what changes you made. So different prompts that you used for your with your student and how you change those. I think it'll be really helpful because I can add those different changes to the slides and make these templates even better for the next group. This is the reading. It's the Turnbull 7-Principle Partnership, and I just took that chapter and I PDF'd it, so please read that. And then also the PowerPoint from last night, and actually, okay, and just so you know, I have now uploaded the new and improved and accurate PowerPoint. So let's just kind of look through that really quickly. We added the question for the culturally responsive reflection critical reflection number 5 around the culturally responsive transition project. So what did you add, delete, change, and why? Any prompts that you used for your students. We talked about Sankofa last night, and that kind of reclaiming of labels and things like that, and also just kind of how we sit with different labels. And we broke out into our groups to talk about that. We talked about parent participation and what the advocacy expectations and the customization opportunities for higher and lower SES families is, and then how we can start building resources for all of our families. So we talked about home visits and the different things that we need to keep in mind for home visits, and then questions that you can consider as you're doing a home visit. Of course, make sure that you make notes and reflect and debrief after the visit. Whoa, okay, that's not really, let's just, there we go. And then also we talked about the nominating a life-changing teacher and getting the word out about that. And then what's next? Oops, and I forgot to put this in there as well. The Turnbull reading. So you've got the Turnbull reading, you've got chapter 5, the critical reflection and the culturally responsive transition project. Here's the locations. We're going to be next week in room 127 here in Mother Rosalie Hill Hall. And that's that part. So, and then here is the, let me update this as All right, we're doing a few start and stops. So now I have added the final version of the PowerPoint from last night. And there's the Turnbull Chapter 7, which is on the principles of partnerships. And here is our room list. There's the 2 readings. And here's the 2 assignments that are due by next Monday. So here is the critical reflection. And I just need to know what you did to each slide, so you're reflecting on that. So if you have any questions around that, let me know. One of the other things that came up last night was around your group projects. And so I want to make sure to kind of touch base about that. So right here is where we have the link for the for each one of the groups. So the family resource folders. Some of the groups, I jumped into their room and I went through and talked about the types of resources that they may have. So you can see here's the groups right there. And then when we look at the assignment, I'm just going to kind of go through some of the things that you might put in. So for example, you're of course going to want to have information about SDI. So what does it look like for your particular age level? What kind of service delivery models are there? What kind of service minutes are happening? So, for example, in the TKK, then there's a lot more occupational therapy. It could be speech and language therapy, and it's around like sounds and phonemic awareness and that type of thing. Whereas when you're in the 18 to 22-year-old program, or you're in high school, your specific learning, your speech and language support might be around advocating for yourself or speaking up and participating in group discussions. And so it changes depending on whatever the level is. We talked about the parental rights cheat sheet on the procedural safeguards for the target audience. And remember, I went through being informed of the meeting, consent for assessments and procedural safeguards, so access to records, due process, and confidentiality being really important things you're going to want to highlight for the cheat sheets. And then what is the difference between the IFSP, the IEP, the ITP, and the SOP? So if you are with the secondary students, you know that that's when you are required to do the ITP, and then for a student that's exiting out of school, they need the summary of performance. But all students need the IEP kind of cheat sheet and understanding of what are the requirements and the mandates. We also know that although it's not required, for a transition plan, starting with transition planning in elementary school is really helpful. So, there's those sheets in the Zorro Center that talked about like how you can bring up transition in elementary school and what things you can work with. One of the big things that a lot of people do around, for example, middle school is helping students ask for help or self-advocate for themselves. And so we talked last night in the group about creating like a self-advocacy sheet around their disability and what supports actually work for them and what supports don't work for them, so that they can hand that to a teacher instead of the teacher just getting a list of kids with IEPs. And then also any organizations and people to contact. So, for example, if you're doing the high school to 18 to 22-year-old program or 18 to 22 into adulthood, then most likely you're going to be working with the regional center. Whereas if you're doing the high school to adulthood, you're probably working with the Department of Rehabilitation. And so having the contact person and the information for those different programs, depending on which group you're in, is really helpful. The family support services, so some of those are around DOR and regional center, and I also gave you some links to some websites that might be helpful. You've got the mental health and the behavioral support services. So, suicide prevention would be under this. Where to get free counseling services. You could see also something around like the Gay Straight Alliance. That might be also in just other supports for students, in junior high versus in high school versus beyond. Different cultural groups might be some good community opportunities for the students to make friends. There's the buddies program where it matches up a neuro oh my goodness, my brain's not working, but a neurotypical peer with a student with a disability, and so that they can have friendships and whatnot. Suzanne, Dr. Stoltz has talked about the wheelchair dancing and things like that. So any sort of kind of supports that we have out there for students with disabilities is really helpful. And then the programs specifically for your students. So those are the types of resources that I'm looking for in there. And, making sure that you're jigsawing and kind of one person's not doing all of these things, but that you're all working together to kind of fill up your folder, which you will be presenting on the 23rd. So I think that brings us through this week. As always, I will send out an announcement to give you a link to this video and any other supports that we can. So thank you, and I'll see you in room 127 next week.